In the deepest midwinter silence, when the outer world contracts into stillness, the human soul enters a region of experience that Steiner describes as a spiritual threshold woven into the very rhythm of the year. It is not only nature that rests in this season. Something in the human being also withdraws from the surface of life and sinks inward as though listening for a forgotten language. The darkness of winter does not merely surround us. It creates an inner space in which the soul can draw nearer to its own eternal core. This seasonal inwardness is not sentiment or imagination. It corresponds to cosmic realities that touch the human being far more deeply than is usually sensed. For as the earth swings toward the solstice, Steiner shows that the whole planet undergoes a spiritual inhalation. The expansive forces of summer, which lift human consciousness outward toward the wide spaces of the cosmos, recede. The earth gathers its forces into its center, and in doing so, it gathers the human being as well. In winter, we stand closer to the earth's spiritual interior, to the very beings and forces from which humanity once emerged. The soul, which in summer is carried outward by light, is now gently drawn into depths where it can encounter the roots of its own becoming. And this inward movement prepares something that cannot arise in any other season. The possibility for a new birth within the soul itself. In ancient mysteries, midwinter was always recognized as the time when divine light could first touch earthly existence. But Steiner makes clear that this light is not something merely commemorated. It is something that seeks to arise anew in every human being each year. The outer festival of Christmas is but the echo of an inner mystery, that the forces which once descended into the child of Bethlehem now seek to awaken in the depths of each soul. What awakens there is not a repetition of a historical event, but a seed for the future. For the light that is born at midwinter does not belong to the past. It belongs to what humanity is meant to become. When the soul turns inward in the winter season, it becomes receptive to impressions it cannot receive when the outer world is bright and overwhelming. It begins to sense that behind the stillness of nature lies a cosmic gesture. The earth offers her quiet so that the human being may listen. And in this listening, something long forgotten stirs, a memory not of images, but of essence. The soul remembers that it once existed in spiritual worlds before descending to earth, and in that remembering, faintly at first, the conditions for future evolution begin to take shape. Midwinter does not only recall what once was, it prepares what will one day be. Yet Steiner always leads us one step deeper. This inner Christmas is not an isolated moment. It is part of a vast cosmic rhythm through which humanity itself is being prepared for future epochs. The darkness surrounding the solstice is not a mere season. It is a cosmic womb. The forces that shine into the soul at this time are the very forces that will shape the next stages of human development. The forces that will one day allow the human eye to stand in full freedom, to perceive in full clarity, to love with full strength. What can arise in the human being at Christmas is the seed of what humanity will become in centuries ahead. And thus, even though the world outside appears dormant, the human soul stands in the presence of a spiritual activity more intense and more formative than at any other time of the year. The winter stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is the presence of forces preparing the soul for its future. The light that seeks to be born now is not fragile. It is immense. But it can only enter if the soul in the quiet of this season, becomes inwardly still enough to receive it. As the weeks around Christmas unfold, something in the human being begins to loosen from the heaviness of ordinary consciousness. Steiner often describes this period as one in which the soul stands subtly closer to the spiritual world, not through vision or sensation, but through a deepened transparency. What usually appears solid and impenetrable in our inner life gains a softness. Thoughts no longer seem as tightly bound to the intellect, and feelings acquire an undercurrent of quiet solemnity. The soul, if it allows itself to enter this mood, senses that the world is not silent at all. It is speaking in a different language. Steiner points out that humanity in its future will develop a form of consciousness far more delicate and morally awake than what we know today. This future consciousness will not rely on the senses alone. It will perceive meaning as immediately as the eye perceives color. And the first seeds of this capacity are planted in the contemplative stillness of midwinter. For the soul can only learn to hear the world of spirit when it has first learned to listen in silence. Christmas time becomes a schooling, the yearly practice of inner receptivity without which the future faculties of humanity cannot awaken. In this season, a subtle transformation takes place in the relationship between the human eye and the astral body. Throughout the year, the astral body surges with desires, sensitivities, anxieties, and restless seeking. But in the depths of winter, Steiner explains that the astral body becomes more transparent, more permeable to the light of the ego. The eye shines through it more easily, like a lantern through thinning veils. And this momentary clarity is not merely a comfort, it is preparation. For humanity will one day need an astral body completely illumined by the eye, entirely penetrated by moral will. The winter weeks, when the earthly world is still, offer the soul a preview of what it must eventually become. It is in this softened, inward atmosphere that the soul becomes receptive to the Christmas mystery. Not the historical event alone, but the ongoing descent of the Christ impulse into human interiority. Steiner describes how, each year, the forces streaming from the spiritual world toward Christmas are not the same forces that streamed in previous centuries. They are ever new, ever deepening, because humanity itself stands at different thresholds of evolution in different epochs. Thus, the Christmas experience of the ancient world was not the Christmas experience of the Middle Ages, and the Christmas experience of our time is preparing something for the future that earlier humanity could not yet receive. The festival is a living being, metamorphosing as humanity metamorphoses. In the quiet heart of the season, the soul becomes especially aware of what Steiner calls the future human being within the present human being. It is as though one could sense, behind the familiar contours of one's personality, a younger being waiting to be born, yet paradoxically older, more knowing, more luminous. This future being is not imagination. It is the deeper individuality that will one day unfold fully in later cultural epochs. The Christmas light does not simply illuminate the soul. It awakens within it a foretaste of its own potential. And once awakened, this seed continues to work through the entire coming year, though usually unnoticed. Through this, the human being participates in a cosmic rhythm larger than any single lifetime. Just as the earth breathes through the seasons, humanity breathes through the epochs. And Christmas is the moment when the breath of the future enters the present. With every winter solstice, forces stream toward humanity that belong not to the past, but to what humanity is destined to become in the far future. In the sixth and seventh cultural epochs, when love will become a conscious force and wisdom a moral power. The soul cannot yet embody these capacities fully, but at Christmas it can receive their imprint. Because of this, Steiner stresses that the mood of the season matters, not in a sentimental sense, but in a deeply spiritual sense. A distracted or restless soul cannot perceive what the cosmos offers now. But a soul that enters the quiet, that turns gently inward, that allows itself to feel the gravity and stillness of the season, such a soul becomes a chalice for the forces that prepare it for the tasks of the coming age. In this way, Christmas is not only a feast of remembrance, it is a sanctuary of preparation. As the 12 holy nights unfold, the soul enters a region of heightened spiritual intimacy. Steiner speaks of these nights as a bridge between the old year and the new, but more profoundly, as a bridge between the earthly and the cosmic human being. During these nights, the earth's breathing rhythm is at its deepest inward point. Nature sleeps, the life forces are drawn into the core of the earth, and in this withdrawal, the human soul is freed, just slightly, from the weight of external impressions. What presses so heavily upon us throughout the year becomes lighter, more permeable. And because the soul is less entangled with outer life, it becomes more accessible to the forces that stream from the cosmos. It is in this loosened state of consciousness that images, intuitions, or quiet stirrings of destiny sometimes arise. These are not dreams in the ordinary sense, they are reflections of deeper necessities. Steiner explains that the spiritual world speaks more clearly during these nights because humanity is inwardly quieter than at any other time of the year. The cosmic script of the coming year, and in a deeper sense the coming decades and epochs, can be sensed in delicate outlines. It is as though the future brushes against the edges of the soul. We cannot grasp it fully, but we can feel its direction. This heightened capacity for spiritual impression is not a privilege, but a preparation. Steiner emphasizes that humanity is slowly developing faculties that will one day allow the soul to perceive its karmic path consciously. In early epochs, the gods guided humanity directly. In future epochs, the human being must guide himself through moral intuition. The holy nights offer a yearly schooling toward this capacity. They cultivate the ability to sense meaning, to feel the inner gesture of destiny, to recognize subtle spiritual currents. These are the very capacities the soul will need in the coming stages of evolution. In this time, the relationship between the human I and the cosmic I becomes especially significant. Steiner describes how the Christ being, since the mystery of Golgotha, has united himself with the earthly evolution of humanity. The Christmas season is the time when this cosmic I draws nearest to the individual I within the human soul, not in dramatic visions, but in the quiet strengthening of moral resolve, in the softening of the heart, in the awakening of compassion. These are not psychological effects, they are spiritual realities. The forces of the Christmas season are shaping the soul for its future role in the evolution of love. The holy nights also mirror the path of future humanity in another way. Steiner often describes how forthcoming epochs will demand a new relationship to the spiritual world, one in which freedom and responsibility are inseparable. Human beings will no longer encounter spirituality as an external authority, but as an inner presence demanding conscious participation. The quiet inner activity of these nights, this listening, this stillness, this turning towards spiritual meaning, is an early exercise in that future capacity. It teaches the soul to stand in silence before the spiritual world, not as a child before a parent, but as a free being preparing to collaborate with cosmic powers. Through these nights, the human being experiences something of the future human condition, a consciousness that does not simply react to the world, but perceives through essence. The seeds of this future perception are planted here in the stillness of midwinter, and they grow invisibly throughout the year, strengthening conscience, refining thought, deepening feeling, aligning the will with moral truth. What we receive at Christmas and during the holy nights does not manifest immediately. It works slowly, like roots forming deep below the soil before any green shoot appears. Years may pass before the soul realizes that a strength felt in crisis, a clarity gained in confusion, or a new warmth toward others had its origin in the winter mysteries of long before. Yet the more consciously we live into this season, the more these forces can enter us. For the spiritual world does not impose itself. It waits. It offers. It mirrors the freedom that humanity will one day fully embody. And in this offering lies the heart of the Christmas preparation, that the soul learns not only to receive light, but to carry it forward into the coming year, into the coming epoch, into the long future of human evolution. As the holy nights deepen and slowly give way to the dawn of the new year, the soul begins to sense that what it has received in silence now seeks expression in life. Steiner often describes this transition as a subtle shift from cosmic contemplation to earthly becoming. The forces that could be felt only inwardly during the solstice period now begin to weave themselves gradually into thought, intention, and will. What was seed becomes impulse. What was impression becomes direction. And although the soul rarely recognizes this transformation consciously, it is one of the most important rhythms in human evolution. In these weeks, the human being stands at a delicate balance point between two worlds. On one side lies the earthly realm, dense, necessary, exacting. On the other lies the spiritual realm, silently offering meaning, moral substance, and future potential. Steiner explains that the Christmas season is the one moment of the year when these two realms approach one another with unusual closeness. The veils between them are thinner, not so that visions may appear, but so that forces may pass from one world into the other. The human soul becomes the vessel in which this exchange can occur. And it is precisely through this exchange that humanity is prepared for the tasks of coming epochs. For Steiner, the future of humanity is not an abstraction. It is already present in nascent form within the depths of each soul. In coming epochs, human beings will need a moral clarity far beyond what is common today, an intuitive understanding of spiritual law, and a capacity to act out of love as consciously as one now acts out of logic. These faculties cannot be forced into existence. They ripen slowly, nourished, body experiences the soul undergoes throughout the year, but their germination begins here in the winter season when the soul is most permeable to spiritual influence. Christmas becomes the yearly springtime of the future human being. This is why Steiner speaks of the inner Christmas not as a symbolic idea, but as a real spiritual event. In the human heart lives a space that is not metaphorical, but actual, an organ of spiritual perception that is not yet fully developed. During the winter weeks, this organ becomes more sensitive, more living, more attuned to the presence of the Christ impulse. And this impulse does not merely strengthen piety or comfort, it shapes capacities that humanity will require when the next cultural epoch dawns. The love that radiates through the Christmas season is not the same love human beings expressed centuries ago. It is preparing a new form of love, one that will one day illuminate the entire structure of human society. At the same time, the forces of the winter season work not only on the heart, but on the thinking life. In the cold clarity of these weeks, thought can detach more easily from personal desire. Steiner emphasizes that winter teaches the soul to think more objectively, more inwardly, and with a moral quality. This purified thinking is the forerunner of the future clear thought Steiner often describes, a thinking capable of perceiving spiritual truths as clearly as the senses perceive the physical world. The Christmas season, in its quiet and crystalline atmosphere, is the first schooling ground for this new form of cognition. But perhaps the most important preparation for future epochs lies in the way the Christmas season reshapes the human will. For most of the year, the will is bound tightly to habit, desire, and external necessity. Yet in the weeks around the solstice, a new quality can enter the will: softness, openness, the willingness to begin again. This is not weakness, it is renewal. Steiner explains that the future human being will need a will capable of moral creativity, not merely reaction, and such a will can germinate only where the soul experiences reverence, a mood especially alive at Christmas time. Reverence is the soil in which the moral will of the future can take root. Thus, while outer life seems dormant, a tremendous inner activity is taking place. The soul receives light not to keep it for itself, but to carry it forward into the world. The impressions of these weeks settle into the deeper layers of the heart, where they will work quietly over months, maturing into strength, insight, compassion, and courage. And the more consciously a human being enters the mood of the season, the more these forces can permeate the entire coming year. What is offered at Christmas becomes the quiet architect of human destiny. As the new year unfolds, the inner activity that began during the solstice begins to work more deeply into the human soul, shaping the coming months in quiet yet decisive ways. Steiner explains that the impressions received during the Christmas season do not vanish. When the festivities end, they sink beneath ordinary consciousness and begin to permeate the life forces, the rhythms of feeling, and the moral texture of thought. Just as a seed vanishes into the soil before it sprouts, the forces of the winter mysteries disappear from awareness, only to grow within the deeper layers of the human being. Throughout the year, the soul encounters joys and trials, successes and failures, companionship and solitude. But underneath these experiences work the forces planted during winter, shaping how the human being meets each event. The Christmas impulse does not prevent suffering. Rather, it begins to alter the quality of our relationship to it. A difficulty that once overwhelmed may now awaken patience. A loss that once hardened the heart may now deepen compassion. The moral resilience that future humanity will require is prepared through precisely this transformation of experience. Steiner shows that what we receive at Christmas is not protection from destiny, but strength within destiny. In the course of the year, this strength expresses itself most clearly in how we relate to other human beings. Future epochs will demand a new form of human connection, one grounded not in instinct or tradition, but in conscious moral insight. The seeds of this future social life are planted each winter when the soul becomes more receptive to the forces of understanding and empathy. What awakens during the Christmas season gradually matures into the ability to sense another person's inner being without judgment or fear. This is not yet clairvoyance. It is a strengthening of the moral imagination that foreshadows the capacities humanity will one day fully embody. As the months pass, the soul meets countless karmic encounters, meetings with individuals whose presence challenges, surprises, or uplifts us. These encounters often appear random, yet Steiner explains that each one is shaped by the higher individuality long before incarnation. The forces received during Christmas time help the soul approach these meetings with greater openness. They soften the rigidities that would otherwise distort human relationships. They help loosen old karmic knots by introducing warmth where coldness once ruled, clarity where confusion once prevailed. In this way, the Christmas impulse becomes a living force working through the entire year, preparing humanity to meet one another in ways befitting future epochs. And yet, this preparation is not only social, it is also profoundly individual. For in the coming epochs, the human I will need to stand in ever greater freedom. Freedom, as Steiner understands it, is not the ability to do as one pleases, but the capacity to act from the deepest truth of one's being. The winter season offers the soul a yearly opportunity to touch this inner truth, however faintly. As the year progresses, this truth becomes a quiet, guiding thread. We sense it when we feel compelled to take a moral stand, to speak honestly, to serve without reward. These impulses may seem small, but they are the early signs of a future humanity whose actions will spring directly from spiritual insight. The Christmas forces also gradually shape the thinking life throughout the year. Thought becomes more transparent, less ruled by rigid opinions, more capable of perceiving the essence of things. Steiner often describes a future form of cognition, clear, moral, intuitive, that will replace today's abstract and often divisive thinking. The first glimmers of this future cognition appear as moments of sudden clarity, when a problem once clouded by emotion becomes transparent, or when understanding arises without struggle. These moments are the distant echo of the clarity experienced by the soul during the winter stillness. What was received silently now returns as illumination. Finally, the forces of Christmas shape the will in subtle but lasting ways. Throughout the year, the will is tested by discouragement, by fatigue, by confusion, by temptation. Yet again and again, something quietly strengthens it from within. A person may feel unable to continue, and then, without knowing how, finds the strength to act. A person may face moral difficulty and suddenly sense the courage needed to choose rightly. Steiner explains that these moments are the ripened fruit of what winter planted. The will is not made stronger by pressure alone. It is strengthened by the quiet, nurturing forces the soul absorbs during the season of deepest stillness. Thus, as the year progresses, the Christmas impulse becomes less a memory and more a living power, shaping thought, feeling, and will, preparing the soul not only for the coming months, but for the long unfolding of human evolution. As the seasons turn and the soul once again approaches the outer warmth and expansion of spring and summer, the forces received during the winter season undergo yet another metamorphosis. They do not fade. Rather, they rise from the depths into clearer activity. Steiner often describes this transformation as the soul's summer waking, in which what was received unconsciously during the winter can begin to work consciously through the human being's deeds. The cosmic breathing rhythm reverses. Where winter drew the human being inward, summer now carries the soul outward toward the world. And in this outwardness, the inner Christmas impulse becomes action. During these expansive months, the soul encounters the full brightness and density of earthly life. Responsibilities multiply, relationships challenge us, and the outer world demands clarity and strength. It is here that the winter forces are tested, for what was received in silence must now prove itself in motion. The heightened compassion stirred at Christmas must meet real human suffering. The moral intuitions formed in stillness must now confront the complexities of daily life. The clarity glimpsed in winter must now permeate thinking under pressure, and when it does, humanity takes an evolutionary step forward, for every time the human soul brings a winter-born insight into earthly action, it prepares capacities needed for future epochs. This transition from inner seed to outer deed is essential for the future of humanity. Steiner explains that a coming epochs will require human beings to act not from instinct or inheritance, but from freely chosen moral insight. Yet such insight cannot arise out of mere opinion or abstract thought. It must be forged from the union of inner stillness and outer experience. Christmas gives the inner stillness. Life gives the outer experience. And the interplay between the two builds the moral organism of the future human being. In this light, even life's difficulties can be seen differently. A challenge in midsummer often bears the imprint of a strength planted in midwinter. A crisis that requires moral courage often corresponds to a seed of courage placed into the will during the 12 holy nights. The more consciously one lives through these rhythms, the more clearly one senses that destiny is not random. The year itself becomes a teacher, a cosmic curriculum, through which the human being learns to transform spiritual impulses into earthly realities. As the year nears its final quarter, a quiet turning begins once more. Autumn slowly draws the soul again toward inwardness, but now with the fruits of the year's activity in hand. The experiences of spring and summer, infused with the subtle forces of the Christmas impulse, begin to condense into insight, into conscience, into self-knowledge. This is the season when the soul begins to recognize what it has become through the year. The very way in which we meet autumn's inward gesture is shaped by the strength winter once provided. In this way, the Christmas forces reverberate through every season, preparing the soul gradually, rhythmically, patiently for the tasks of future ages. By the time winter approaches again, The inner organism of the soul has changed. It is not the same being who meets the solstice as it was the year before. Something has matured. Something has been learned. Something has been purified. And because of this, the soul can receive the winter forces more deeply, more consciously, more freely. Each yearly cycle becomes not a repetition, but a spiral, ascending, widening, deepening. This spiral is nothing less than the evolutionary path of humanity reflected in the rhythm of a single year. Through this metamorphic cycle, winter reception, spring emergence, summer application, autumn digestion, the human being is gradually prepared for capacities that will not fully bloom for thousands of years. The Christmas impulse works across lifetimes, not only across seasons. It strengthens the future clear thinking, the future moral intuition, the future brotherhood that Steiner describes as the essence of later cultural epochs. And while these capacities may seem distant, they are born in the same quiet each year when the soul meets the winter light. Thus, the yearly rhythm itself becomes a prophetic gesture. In the winter, we receive what we will one day be. In the summer, we practice becoming it. And through the entire year, we shape ourselves toward the future human being, emerging gradually from within. As the year completes its great circle, a quiet realization can dawn in the attentive soul. The Christmas season is not only a festival, nor merely a remembrance of an ancient mystery, but a living force woven into the very structure of human evolution. It returns each year not as repetition, but as renewal. In its depths, the human being encounters the same cosmic impulse that once radiated from the mystery of Golgotha, yet now adapted to the needs of the present and the demands of the future. Steiner stresses again and again that the Christ impulse is not static. It evolves with humanity, and humanity evolves through it. The yearly rhythm is therefore a dialogue. The soul grows toward its future, and the cosmos responds with the forces needed for that growth. In this dialogue, the Christmas season plays a unique role because it awakens each year a faint echo of humanity's ultimate destiny. There is, in the depths of the human being, a higher nature, an individuality that stretches across lifetimes, a being that is already aligned with the far future of human evolution. Most of the year, this higher nature remains hidden beneath the noise of the everyday personality. But in midwinter, when the world is still and the breathing of the earth turns inward, the veil grows thinner. The higher self draws closer, not as a memory of the past, but as an anticipation of what the human being will one day fully become. This encounter, silent, delicate, easily missed, shapes the deepest layers of the soul. It awakens a longing for truth. It strengthens the moral will. It kindles a warmth toward other human beings that may only show itself months later in simple acts of kindness, in moments of courage, in quiet understanding. What emerges outwardly in spring and summer has its source in the hidden winter seed. In this way, the Christmas season prepares humanity not only for the coming year, but for the coming epoch, for the gradual transformation of human nature itself. Steiner often describes how the next stages of human evolution will demand a new clarity of thought, a new purity of feeling, and a new strength of will. These capacities cannot be taught from outside. They must be awakened from within. And it is precisely this inner awakening that the Christmas season cultivates. In midwinter, the soul becomes more receptive to the forces that will one day allow it to perceive spiritual realities directly, to feel the essence of another human being without prejudice, to act from a center of moral intuition rather than external authority. The Christmas light is not only comfort, it is initiation. At the same time, the yearly rhythm teaches the soul something essential about freedom. The spiritual world does not force its gifts upon us, it offers them. It waits for the soul to seek, to quiet itself, to prepare the inner room. In this waiting lies the dignity of the human being. Every winter, the cosmos extends its hand, but the human being must choose to take it. Steiner emphasizes that this mutuality, the meeting of cosmic grace and human freedom, is the foundation upon which future humanity will be built. Only through freedom can the human being become a co-creator in the evolution of the world. As a result, the Christmas season becomes a mirror of the long arc of human destiny. In its stillness, the soul touches the future. In its light, the soul perceives the meaning of the past. The yearly descent of spiritual forces is a reminder that evolution is not linear, but rhythmic, advancing through spirals of forgetting and remembering, outward striving and inward renewal. Each Christmas marks a point on this spiral, an invitation to lift a little more of the human being's hidden potential into consciousness. And when the soul meets this season with reverence, not as ritual, but as inner participation, it begins to realize that it is not merely living through the year. The year is living through it. The cosmic rhythms shape thought, soften feeling, ennoble will. They prepare the soul to become what humanity must one day be, a being capable of freedom rooted in love, wisdom permeated with moral strength, and action guided by spiritual insight. What Christmas offers each year is the seed of these future capacities. Thus, even as the world lies in winter darkness, the human soul carries within it the light of epochs yet to come. And when that light is tended, quietly, faithfully, it grows from year to year, from life to life, forming the bridge between what humanity has been and what it is destined to become.